Welcome back to the Audible Angle. Hopefully, you've been with us all week getting our college football, NFL football, NFL, our college Division III football updates. Not sure. We did just complete a little review of the Stag Bowl. Not exactly sure the order these will release yet due to computer and technology issues. I do want to point out that we do record live. We're live on the Audible Angle, and you're probably going to notice our faces changing colors and getting brighter and darker. I assume all of us have a large flat screen TV tuned into Miami and Ole Miss in the background. It's currently Miami 3, Ole Miss 7. My only, I guess, again, off script already. My very quick take is seems like Miami's missed a couple opportunities on some passes down the field, and Ole Miss broke off a long run. The point of that little intro is to say the theme or the modus operandi of this program will be automatic interruption on big plays or quick analysis on the live Miami and Ole Miss action. We're going to do some rather benign analysis, not boring. It's just not extremely urgent, or as Irby leads us through a memorialization of some former NFL coaches and maybe an intro or reintroduction to what will or could be new NFL coaches coming down the pipe. With all that long intro that fans have told us to ditch, I welcome back Herbs in the glasses, Dilly, fat face too close to the camera, and Druzy is back, got the headphones, he's got a mic, he's got a new light. I mean, I don't know if somebody told him he's has any ownership in the Audible Angle or something. Herb's going behind my back, but I think it's key contributor status. I don't know the titles. We'll figure it out. But I think I got probably another week and a half before Druzy and Herbs are going solo without me. But as of now, I think I'm the only one with the password. So I got a little time left.
Yeah, no, you can calm that concern, that conjecture, if you will. I think regular contributor is a good term, and Dilly, there's been no contract talks from myself nor Druzy, and I don't believe I can actually sign off on any contracts because, quite frankly, I don't believe I have signed the contract that you put in front of me over the weekend.
Well, Druzy, here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Bridge Up Brewing in Door County in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, or the Cherry Hut in Fish Creek, Wisconsin, which features Bridge Up beer?
I have not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's no contract in the works for you just yet. That is, you got to visit and get the approval from our biggest supporter.
Seems fair. Seems fair. Seems like a good road trip.
Got the Packer version of the shirt on today. Looking forward to that. Herbs, you know, where do you want to start on the coaches? Let's just have the production meeting right here. Do you want to, is it alphabetical? Is it order of importance? Are we building up to a crescendo with Harbaugh and McDaniels getting fired at the later stages of the week than Black Monday?
I think the best way to go through this is to kind of go chronologically in order of when they were released. So we'll start on the mid-season, middle of the season releases, if you will, just to remind listeners of what has happened previous to this kind of craziness here after, which is always on Black Monday. We're recapping it here on a Thursday, Friday, and then kind of go through it and just kind of talk about it. And then I want to get everybody's thoughts on some of these releases and if they were noteworthy, if they were driven by bad ownership, driven by bad play, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're good with it, Dilly, I think the best route to go is kind of chronologically kind of get it all laid out. And then we kind of maybe highlight, I can kind of steer it here with some specific questions, but what do you think?
Ready, fire away.
All right. The first two guys that were released, and I'm thinking, and I do want to give you guys a minute to comment if you would like, but this is probably driven by how team success. Usually a lot of these mid-season firings are done that way. Brian Callahan from the Titans, canned. And Brian Dable from the Giants, also canned. What I do wanna ask, and I wanna get your thoughts here, Dilly and Drew. I quite frankly, I thought Brian Dable probably should have been canned after last year, and maybe they gave him a little bit of a leash here in this season, but there was a lot of things that happened in that season. I kind of feel for Dable. I don't know if I feel for Callahan because they were junk and junkier in his time there. But I thought Brian Dable had him playing pretty good, and before Jackson Dart went down and the running back made his foot go backwards, that kind of stuff. So what do you think?
Start with Druzy here.
All right, yeah, I think Dable. I feel like they were going to give. I agree with you, Herbs. I think they were going to give Dable another shot. Maybe when you think about having a quarterback in Dart this year and Malik Neighbors and seeing what he could do with it, and Neighbors tore his ACL week 3 or 4 or something like that. Dart got hurt. The Giants just haven't drafted very well up until recently, and so definitely a tough pill for Brian Dable. Uh, so I agree with you.
I'll start off by saying these organizations suck and they are poorly run. And the fact that Callahan, I don't know why he didn't just stay at Callahan Auto Parts, do some brake pad work. But the Titans have the ownership lady, can't remember her name, doesn't matter. She's not even around. If you have a strong general manager and coach combination, that's probably a good thing because she's not a football operations kind of person, but she kind of, I think the model is once in a while she rolls up and meddles, and that's how you end up with these decisions like keeping a coach who hasn't performed, hasn't started off very well. How he got there, we don't know. But if you're going to draft a rookie quarterback, and you might hear me say this again, if you're going to get the number one pick and try to build a program, one of the worst things you can go do is start with a deadbeat coach, which they basically did, and or fire the coach in the middle of the season, and or have him have two coaches, two different systems in his first 2 years. They're almost already burning Cam Ward. Now, of course, maybe they'll pull one out of the hat and have a good hire and an offensive-minded quarterback guru or whisperer. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell, he's not available. He's number one quarterback whisperer, according to media reports. And the Giants do the same thing. They kind of go a bunch of half measures. They keep Joe Shane. Nobody likes them. Maybe because they were on Hard Knocks and they let Barkley walk out the door and go win a Super Bowl. But it's a similar kind of deal. They decided to keep Dable, and he is an offensive-minded coach. And then, maybe not. So it was a blunder, and they didn't make it any better by getting rid of him midseason. Either make the tough decision the year before, clean house, including the general manager, and start from scratch. Then they pulled the other bunk. I didn't know I had such strong feelings about the New York Football Giants. But
Neither did we.
What are you doing with Russell Wilson? What a total abomination, because they put Dable in a position where he's like, well, they want to fire me. They almost fired me. I got to find a way to win a couple games, not play the best quarterback, not build the team, not, you could argue Jackson Dart maybe wasn't ready. Not to mention they have Malik Neighbors, and then they bring in Russell Wilson. And I don't know if I believe early on there was some behind the scenes stuff too, where I think they kind of forced his hand a little bit because they didn't want to rush Jackson Dart in. And why you didn't just go with Jameis Winston? If Brian Dable could have done what he wanted after the fact, or certainly before the fact, he probably tried. Get Russell Wilson out of here. Give me Jameis, because it's either going to be fun and Neighbors is going to be awesome, ready to go and happy for when we eventually go to Jackson Dart, because it's not going to be Jameis Winston. But Russell Wilson leaves you with this. He won a super, is he, just enough to to slow down the whole process. Garbage all around. Fire them all. Get rid of them. Boo.
Wow.
That quarterback room gave Dable zero chance. It feels like, there was some options there, but I think Dilly hit on something. I feel like Dable was probably forced into playing Mr. Unlimited, who turned out to be extraordinarily limited, and the writing was on the wall.
They had the perfect quarterback in-house to start the first 4 to 6 games, pile up some losses, but have fun, keep the fans engaged, and prime the pump for Jackson Dart, and they just let Jameis, wilt away. Some of this could be I did keep Malik Neighbors as my keeper in my main fantasy football league, so watching him try to forge a career with old moonball floppy Russ Wilson was disgusting. Herbs, your thoughts on the Giants and Titans?
All right, listeners, we have just witnessed the longest dissertation on who gives a shit, right? Like, welcome to that. I don't know if you've watched Brockmire on Netflix, but I feel like you've got a little Brockmire in you. Anyway,
you're handling the host duties. Just serve us up another one. Let's go.
All right. So next we're going to talk about, and I think I'm going to loop all these guys in, and I'm going to circle back and ask you guys which ones you think are the most significant and firings, and which one is the most undeserving firing here. Because there's a list. We talked about 2 lackluster franchises in the Titans and the Giants. There's some good franchises that we're going to be talking about here, and some up and coming franchises, if you will. First, I'm going to talk about John Harbaugh with the Ravens. He was canned. Hold your applause here. Raheem Morris with the Falcons. That was a guy that probably shouldn't have been in that position. Wasn't their first, second, third, fourth, or fifth choice, and then kind of got dropped in there. Lame duckish. Kevin Stefanski with the Browns lost his job as well. Pete Carroll, all 89 years of him, is gone at the Raiders. See you later. Jonathan Gannon. A lot of us don't know who Jonathan Gannon is. He coached for the Arizona Cardinals. And then finally today, Hot Stove Report has Mike McDaniel of the Dolphins. Druzy, Dilly, we'll start first on who you think is the most deserving to lose their job out of that list. Druzy, go ahead.
Yeah, probably not a surprise at all that Jonathan Gannon was let go. They really didn't even piece anything together over 3 years. Now, again, not all of that is his fault, but they do have some what seems like decent young offensive players with Marvin Harrison Jr. They've had some injuries. Kyler Murray's kind of been all over the map, but for the Cardinals 4 or 5 years ago were getting somewhere. Like they were starting to build players at key positions, and they just never got it going. So I don't see a surprise there when you're only winning 4 or 5 games a year.
Yeah, one thing before we get to your feedback here, Dilly, one thing I will say though, and I don't know, Drew, if you agree with this, but one thing about the Cardinals is they did compete all 17 games, and we talked about this on an episode or two ago, Dilly, that Brissett seemed to have the guys playing and they were competitive. But I guess, Drew, your view is that just wasn't what the entire franchise wasn't going in the right direction, and you're going to put that squarely on Jonathan Gannon.
I agree with you. I mean, Brissett was pretty amazing, actually. I mean, didn't have a lot in mind for him. Like, I didn't even realize he's been in the league forever. He's been recycled a bunch of times, and he was amazing for about 8 or 9 weeks. And they were competitive. I mean, I'll give him credit for that, but let's face it, Jacoby Brissett's not the future. I mean, you should be competitive, but just in the end, not enough wins.
Dilly, you're on.
I'll comment a little bit on Gannon. I agree. I think the ownership team, I think they liked Gannon. I think they did appreciate that they did seem to play hard the whole season. He didn't lose the team. They were not total doormats, but it's been a couple of years of underachieving, and it's a lot easier for them to try to restart at coach. I don't know if they're going to try to punt on Kyler Murray's contract. And that's where Gannon probably got let down the most, was just quarterback, misery. Kind of good, kind of bad, doesn't show up sometimes, injury prone. You know, he's probably the guy that got the rawest deal that was not just blatant mismanagement and horrible stewardship of a franchise. He just kind of was a little bit circumstances. We were doing most deserving to get fired, correct? While Gannon makes sense, to me, the most obvious is, and there's going to be some themes here. This one's actually different for once. The old fart that the Raiders hired, Pete Carroll, get out of town. What were they even thinking? Another scenario in which not only do they bring in just, and he said, chomp the gum, say funny things, throw a dummy off the roof of the building in training camp on some joke. He's got a lot of these things, gimmicks. Get out of town. The guy's old. And then not only that, they let him retread all his old buddies, his old quarterback for a franchise. I mean, it's Mark Davis here, folks. What kind of scenario were they under to think that they were going to compete in the division to the point of, they had the roster to let's get Geno Smith in here, just start from scratch, draft a bunch of linemen and hope and understand that you're going to be picking early every year for the next couple of years and build up something. So when you do select a quarterback, which they will this year, and he will be, they have Tom Brady, who we all believe is a football person in the room now. I've heard of him. I've heard he's a football guy. Whether or not he's going to be helpful in these decision-making processes, we'll see. But a quarterback there is going to be likely to fail unless they get the new coach and the new staff everything right, because they're not a well-run franchise. Pete Carroll, most deserving.
Drew, what's your take on most deserving out of this? Outside of Jonathan Gannon, is there another guy there that you kind of pick up and say, that guy probably didn't do the best job for this franchise?
Yes, Pete Carroll. Only because he should have never been hired. It was sort of low-hanging fruit, and I thought it was the easiest answer. And I thought, let's talk about Jonathan Gannon, who, quite frankly, I hadn't heard a lot about. I'm not following the Arizona Cardinals. I did a little bit of research on him today. But Pete Carroll, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. It's just, it was an annoying hire. It felt like it was almost intentional tank job. It had zero chance of success when you start trying to recycle all those players or whatever. So I'm with Dilly on that one.
On the positive side, guys, the Las Vegas Raiders did not have to endure the first head coach actually passing away on the sidelines live, which was a good move by ownership. Next question I want to get you guys' thoughts on. How about the most surprising release out of these? And you can include the midseason guys, but I don't think that they're probably going to be there. Out of Harbaugh, Morris, Stefanski, Carroll, Gannon, those two are probably out, and McDaniels. Which one, when you saw it come down, and there could be others, there still may be some others after playoff games here. Not most doesn't happen. Most of them are already done here. But which one is the most surprising to you? Go ahead, Dilly. You got it done first.
It's to me, it's pretty obvious. It's Mike McDaniel or John Harbaugh. I'll give a strong, I'll give it to Harbaugh because he was so entrenched there. And with McDaniels, you kind of thought he was going to be fired in the middle of the year at one point. So it can't be, the timing of it is strange because they seemed to give him the thumbs up and then it came. So it was the surprising part of the McDaniels one was the timing of it. But Harbaugh, it's such a institution in Baltimore. They're good, and it's a dynamic we've been talking about for a while. We had Coach on talking about Ravens fans, kind of getting tired of we're almost there, we're maybe not there. And I think it's a little surprising to hear that it seems to have come down to the offensive coordinator, and it seems to be that there was a relationship problem with Lamar Jackson. I find that pretty surprising because he always seems like a pretty easygoing guy. But, that'd be my number one, Harbaugh.
Drew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll comment on Harbaugh super quick. I think that one to me is shocking given what he's accomplished and the track record that he has. Because when you think about successful franchises over the last couple of decades, so much of it has to do with coaching staff longevity. Coordinators are going to come and go, but when you think about Belichick or the entire Steelers organization with Tomlin and Cowher, knocking and sort of reflects what a not just professional football but professional sports in general, such a knee jerk profession and business. It's crazy. So that's my quick take on Harbaugh. So I'm with Daly on this, but I think my answer is maybe going to be a little bit surprising. I think it's Kevin Stefanski because the Browns franchise is a mess. And this guy has is it 2 Coach of the Year awards? I know he's got 1 Coach of the Year award at least. I think he's got 2. And think about how poorly that organization is run. They've maybe the worst transaction in the history of the NFL with Deshaun Watson, which is tying up ridiculous amounts of cap room. They had to dust off Joe Flacco last year, and he's led him to the playoffs. 2 Coach of the Year awards, like we said. You know, there's not been a lot of talent there. They got a couple of young guys with like Judkins coming into their own a little bit, but for an organization that's poorly run, I mean, who's going to be excited to come in there and run that and just be a part of that organization? So I do feel a little bit for Kevin Stefanski, but I think also we'll probably get into this, but it won't be hard for him to find work.
Yeah, I think some of the things to your point, you're both kind of agreeing on the Harbaugh thing here. I would kind of counterpoint this.
Quick audible here. Miami.
That's a
finally
big one.
Connecting on some long balls, 52-yard touchdown. Just want to draw your attention to your TV screens. Our predictions coming to fruition, looking a little brighter now. Miami has woken up since we started talking coaching staffs.
Yeah, I appreciate that live look in here, Dilly, but I want to throw kind of another angle at the Harbaugh firing, and I agree. Coach had mentioned it. We had the inside look. It doesn't seem like the fans. He didn't have the fans. Maybe lost them a few years back, and this was kind of icing on the cake. But recently as today, it looks to me like that Harbaugh is looking for a GM power, right? And we've heard this. This is a kind of a retread. He wants more than just the head coaching job. So I'm wondering if this was kind of a long-term coming, that he had some conversation saying, hey, I want some more power here. I want some more of this. And the organization's like, enough of that, man. You can't even win on the field. You're not going to get the GM position here. So good luck elsewhere. Drew, I would have probably chosen Stefanski for all of the reasons that you said, as well as poor as that team has been. He's got the buy-in from those players. Like that team, crazy enough, all through the season, they had no chance, but they played and gave almost every single team a run. Like they beat the Packers handily. They've got the sack leader on the team. That there's something to that. So I don't think he lost the locker room. I'm surprised with Stefanski, and quite frankly, I think he's going to be a guy along with Harbaugh that's going to probably find the job. Before we move on to who could replace some of these, and I don't want to get in too deep here, but anybody surprised by Raheem Morris losing his job?
Let me jump in on Stefanski. I didn't get a chance on Stefanski yet. Sorry to interrupt there, Druzy, but the only reason why it's not surprising that they fired Stefanski is because the Browns are a terribly run organization. What a bunch of buffoons and bums. They saddle this guy who's a good coach with atrocity after atrocity from player acquisition standpoints. Now, I won't carry on as long as I did about other terrible franchises, and I'm going to get another chance when I get my turn on Raheem Morris. But Stefanski is going to be fine. He's happy. He's relieved to be out of that dungeon. And I'm a closeted Browns backup fan. You know, they're my AFC team. And I think, you know, in 2 or 3 years after Deshaun Watson and everything else, hopefully they make a good hire here, but just junk Junk. He was the fall guy for 5 years of atrocities from the GM or whoever was making the call. Raheem Morris, ready, go.
Actually, right before you get Raheem Morris here, let me, Drew, just and listeners, this is what happens when you take a host out of the host seat. He tries to, he's still controlling. He wants to make sure everybody knows that he's still controlling the episode. Damn it. Nobody take control out of me. I'm going to talk when I want to talk. So, Drew, I would normally go to you and get your take on Raheem Morris, but I'm going to go straight to Dilly and say, Dilly, talk to me about Raheem Morris.
Terrible franchise. Horribly run franchise. Atlanta Falcons. Get out of town. Arthur Blank. Find a new hobby. I mean, hand over the reins to somebody that knows what they're doing. Raheem Morris does, what do you expect him to do with this garbage at quarterback? And Cook, maybe not garbage players, but a garbage situation in continuity. They have some guy like Joe Shane that's in charge. That's the whole reason Bill Belichick said, you know what? F you, I'm going to college football, because the Atlanta Falcons wanted to keep a bunch of jamokes in their positions making decisions, and the greatest coach and personnel guy of the past 20 years wants the job, and you say, nah, we suck, and we'd like to continue to suck. And then, Raheem Morris took his shot. He's not a guy that's wielding GM power, so it made a little more sense for him. And then, of course, he gets trashed by the situation, and they'll fire him, and they'll hire a new guy. And I believe they also have an outside party looking at GMs, a different third party helping them in the search for coaches. Junk.
Let it rip, Drew.
Go ahead, Jersey.
It's going to be tough to top. Don't disagree with the organization. Think about 2 drafts ago. It was one of the more jaw-dropping draft situations, right, when they picked Michael Penix Jr. after they signed 35-year-old Kirk Cousins to $1 gajillion. It was just crazy. So Raheem definitely wasn't set up for success. I think Raheem Morris is just more cut out to be a coordinator, or that's what I feel like. Maybe he hasn't been given fair shakes in both of his head coaching opportunities. He hasn't been given a lot of time, but he's been fairly successful as a coordinator. He's got some offensive and defensive coordinating experience in the different positional groups. So I think he'll catch on somewhere, but I don't think, to Dilly's point, this isn't all on Raheem Morris. It's another organization that isn't exactly in top form right now.
Yeah, it does feel, quite frankly, guys, with Raheem Morris, he was almost fired before he was hired.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like he was fired 17 weeks ago when he got into the position. There was just a no win-win. I want to kind of speed us up here and talk about 2 main points as I kind of do my research for this little segment that Dilly quite gratefully gave me the reins for. I looked through this, and there's kind of 2 kind of unique coaching candidates out there that are going to some interesting places. The first one that I want to talk about is, and everybody on this call, on this episode, is old enough to remember the legendary coach Don Shula down at Dolphins country with Dan Marino and the Duper Boys were running around rampant down there. What we want to do is, they are looking, and one of the leading candidates down there is Don Shula's kid, Chris Shula, who's currently serving as the defensive coordinator on the Rams. Do you guys have a take on that? Is there enough there from what he's done on the defensive side with the Rams? Because quite frankly, when I think Rams, I don't think defense ever. Is this just this guy's literally, I'm sorry, it's not a son, it's a grandson of Don Shula. And is it only because of the last name that he gets mentioned here? And is that a right choice? I don't think that the organization as a whole is in the right place. I think there's a lot of question marks there. Druzy, I'm going to give you the feel here on Chris Shula.
Sure, I'll fully admit I don't know a lot about Chris Shula, but I do think that now part of this has to do with, I think the Rams have drafted very well, but that defensive line that the Rams have might be one of the best in the league. getting after the quarterback and causing pressure and making quarterbacks into forcing quarterbacks into bad mistakes. So it's you're right. It's odd to think about the Rams as a defensive team, but they do have some defensive talent. Just thinking like Jared Verse off the top of my head is just he's been awesome. Probably a little name recognition, but interesting. I was kind of figuring out which coordinators were kind of in that next group, Herbs, like you were today. It doesn't seem like there's as many as there were last year. Like there were some very obvious candidates, right? Like Ben Johnson, like we knew he was going to likely to get a head coaching job. I just wonder if it has to do with are there not quite as many coordinators that are ready to take that step this year, and is that part of the reason why he's at the top of the list?
Yeah, I would agree with Druzy that it's a fairly shallow, at least, from our perspective. We don't have as much inside knowledge of coordinators and how much power, and you have to figure out which team, if it's an offensive coordinator under Sean McVay, you think, well, that's Sean McVay's kind of like the old Mike McCarthy offensive coordinators, and even LaFleur's offense coordinator. They don't call plays. They're not in charge of the offense, but they're an offensive coordinator. I will say Shula, he has taken, he's come up through the ranks. He did have a small college gig. Started off as a grad assistant at Indiana. Didn't last long enough to meet Signetti in person there, but he probably has still a little bit of a connection there. And then he's been with the Rams since 2017. Linebacker type coach. It is his first year as coordinator, I believe. Is that let's see, no, second year. It's his second year. He was in the 24 season as well. So you don't think of the Rams as a dominant defense, and I agree with Druzy. Like when you get into teams now, he doesn't go back to Aaron Donald, but when you think about the Rams, you think about a guy like Aaron Donald, or is Jim Schwartz, is he really a genius at getting after the quarterback, or he has Myles Garrett? And Verse is that kind of game wrecker. Not quite on that level, but you start to think about that with guys like that. He comes into a defense that was fairly well established. He's only got a couple years under his belt as a coordinator, so as a head coach, that's a leap of faith. But sometimes those guys hit. I mentioned LaFleur. We don't have to talk about him today. Hopefully, we're just talking about the team for another several weeks. But he was kind of, as I recall it as a fan when he got hired, it was kind of like, now what? This guy's been a whatever coach, and he wasn't a very long offensive coordinator himself. I think you can have a little bit of trust. It's not just nepotism with the last name. You just know he's been around football his whole life. And those kind of guys I tend to trust.
Fair enough. And there gives credence. Both of you gave good reasons for him to do it. One of the most interesting coaches that are out there talking about head coaching jobs. And believe it or not, this coach that I'm going to mention, guys, is getting interviews for head coaching positions. And this being, I think it's worth mentioning, being the third installment of Packer Bear Week. The former Bears coach and former NFL Coach of the Year, with a great offensive mind, Matt Nagy for the Tennessee Titans is kind of leading in their efforts and their thoughts. Here's the deal, guys. Don't shame on that Matt Nagy. He actually had the Bears playing pretty decently for a little bit, for kind of cup of coffee there. He's currently the offensive coordinator at the Chiefs. And was before that, I think he had a cup of coffee as their quarterbacks coach. So Matt Nagy going to the Tennessee Titans with his offensive mind with Cam Ward. What are your thoughts? Good choice? Is Nagy just kind of living off of past results? What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I think Nagy's probably another one of those guys that probably didn't get a fair shake. He was given a franchise that at the time didn't have a ton of talent and was kind of in a rut. He doesn't do a lot for me. No, I think he'll probably get some looks. To me, he's just probably one of those typical retreads. Is he like Raheem Morris 2.0, where you're just giving him a year or two and you're just finding something? My guess is he'll get some looks, and I think he's. Don't get me wrong. I think he's qualified, and maybe if he is given the keys to a team with a little bit more talent, that could make a difference. Well, might just depend upon the situation.
I would say, he splashed a tiny bit with the 12-win season with the Bears. Um, to me, I think uninspiring is probably the word I would use. Not and only because he's followed a similar path as a coordinator. And let me scroll up here just a tiny bit because he was with the Eagles and Chiefs. So he was under Andy Reid as an offensive coordinator. So we know who the actual offensive coordinator is. It's Andy Reid. Went off on his own, got hired, went back to Andy Reid, and now is a candidate again. That doesn't mean he can't learn anything. He certainly can learn from a mistake, but you have to be careful getting into this cycle. I think, Matt Patricia was a guy that, and who's the other one? Offensive guy from the Patriots. He went
Daniel.
back and forth.
Josh McDaniels? Josh
McDaniels, yeah.
McDaniels.
Leave New England after Super Bowl, be back in 2 years, stay another year, go back out, come back, go back, switch coordinating jobs. And, you know, there's an I don't know if it's equal, but there's a number of guys that do that and eventually succeed. And there's some that are just, for some reason, they give a franchise like Tennessee comfort in that they're coming from a renowned coaching tree, an Andy Reid coaching tree, Bill Belichick coaching tree, who I don't think Bill Belichick never really had a great coaching tree. But it gives the franchise comfort. And there's nothing saying there's absolutely zero chance it works out, but I think it's fair to have tempered enthusiasm if Matt Nagy ends up being the guy there.
So the next piece I'll go and we'll kind of wrap on the head coaching and get into a little playoff talk. But I wanted to look up where John Harbaugh was likely to land as well as Kevin Stefanski. I didn't know where you guys were going with with some of the questions we asked about the guys that were released, but those, to be honest, are probably the two biggest names that are out there for former coaches. So you wonder where they're going to land and what they're thinking. Uh, Interesting fact here, guys. In my research today, Hafley has cooled a great deal. The Packers defensive coordinator, which is good news for Packer Nation. But because of some of these releases, which is normal process here in the NFL, Hafley's not out there. So John Harbaugh, which Hafley was the key in the front runner here for the Giants job, Harbaugh is actually the front runner for over at the Giants, which I would agree that Harbaugh should go to the Giants because it's a better, I guess, organization than the Dolphins are. They've got a better football feel in that organization. So if Harbaugh wants to pick up where he left off and kind of do the same stuff he was doing at the Ravens, I think the Giants fits. And then another one, Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if people are not liking him, but the team that's been most linked to him are the Atlanta Falcons. And I hope to hell that Stefanski doesn't end up down in Atlanta because he's going to then middle there as well or go below that. He's going to inherit a mess at quarterback, which we've already chronicled. Guys, what are you thinking this big picture? Am I right that that Stefanski and Harbaugh are probably the biggest wins here for those teams that are looking for coaches? And maybe I'll throw in there just 'cause, Dilly kind of goes exacerbated here. Mike McCarthy's probably the next guy on that list. What do you think, Drew?
Uh, um, Yeah, speaking of Stefanski to Atlanta, I think he does have, I'd have to look it up. He may have some overlap with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota when he was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota, so that might make some sense. But I mean, I guess I don't know. Well, Atlanta would, maybe they roll with Kirk again or not. But to your main question, Herbs, I think it's John Harbaugh with a bullet, right? I just feel like he's he's built up his reputation. He checks all the boxes. And he probably has. I mean, if I was the other organizations, I'd be, why wouldn't you pick up the phone and at least call and see if he's interested? He can probably have his pick, and do not disagree with you on the Giants. That's probably a good fit for him. Young quarterback, it's young wide receiver. Maybe they nail the draft this year, and you got a bunch of good young players that Harbaugh's experience will come into play.
Can I interject?
You may.
Yeah, that's all there is to.
I think there's three things that a coach is probably looking at, especially a highly sought after coach. It's quarterback, it's overall personnel, and it's whatever organizational structure that they want to see or be comfortable with. My big problem with the Giants and John Harbaugh is Joe Shane is still in place as the GM. And if GM or control of the franchise was a problem for him after 18, 19 years in Baltimore and then telling him to get rid of his coordinators and he didn't want to, whatever, I would question whether or not he would end up in New York. I'm sure they want him, obviously, unless Joe Shane gets the boot and he either gets to install his friend, his buddy, or um, he is the GM, if he wants that. Um, I would say a dark horse for him that makes some sense is, and part of this is based on, we all read tweets and everything else, so we rely and we trust a little bit on the reporting, would be Miami Dolphins, because they also do have a GM opening, so he can either be the GM. I don't know if franchises are as interested in doing the dual role stuff. If there is a guy, it'd be Harbaugh, and that would be like that. Um, and I believe he has a little bit of a relationship with ownership there. So if he can go in and kind of a combo deal with the GM and himself and have a hand in that, I wouldn't rule out Miami. Um, Stefanski, um, I think I agree with you guys. I wouldn't want to see him go to Atlanta. If I was Stefanski, if I could get inside his mind, I would want a stable quarterback situation. So if my fantasy, and that's not my fantasy, but if my other option, Harbaugh to Miami, happens, I would look at Stefanski being a huge candidate for the New York Football Giants, because he might look at that and say, I don't really give a crap about anything's better than what I just experienced. And I got a quarterback. I got a lot of defensive tools. I might have a running back. I got a receiver. They got a good tight end. So sign a couple linemen and we might have a winner on our hands pretty early.
Real quick, Oops, I think Stefanski, just to close up Kevin Stefanski talk, I wouldn't be surprised if he just takes an offensive coordinator position somewhere and just says, I've had enough of being a head coach, especially with his Cleveland Browns experience, and just pick somewhere that has an offensive coordinator opening, be a coordinator for a couple years, see what opens up.
Herbs,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm trying to answer your questions. Mike McCarthy, I just don't think the whole Mike McCarthy thing is when you mention him back in Green Bay. That's what kind of gets me going. I mean, that's totally preposterous. However, at a team like Tennessee Titans, I think that'd be a great hire. Possibly something like the Oakland Raiders. I think he offers, but the word on the Raiders, I think, is it's our friend from Minnesota,
Brian Flores. Yeah,
that seems to be some prevailing wisdom. But I think Mike McCarthy would be good at where he's kind of trying to rebuild a foundation and some stability in a program. That would be my fit for McCarthy. Probably not Atlanta. Although, I mean, you wouldn't, if he really wants to coach, you can't really rule out any of them. He is actually, now that I think of it, he has that Pennsylvania tough guy kind of upbringing that to me would bring Cleveland into play too. I would assume he wants a quarterback, but it's a possibility. It's close to home.
Well, there's a familiar quarterback throwing balls there right now, and that he's kind of cut his teeth on there. But a couple of things I just want to mention, and we can certainly move on from this, but I have a soft spot for Kevin Stefanski. I think he's a solid coach. And quite frankly, I think the best fit for Stefanski, to your point, Dilly, if he wants to be a head coach still, if he wants to still be a head coach, I think the best fit for him is at the Baltimore Ravens. His style of play is tough nose. He's familiar with the Ravens. They play in the same division. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, and I don't know if there might be some political stuff there that comes into play, or maybe positive political stuff. But I'd like to see Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if Ravens Nation wants to see Kevin Stefanski because it looks very similar to Harbaugh in the style of what they do and things of that nature. You guys hit on it. The other coordinator that's out there that's getting a lot of pub is Flores. I hope he does go to the Raiders because he's playing for he kind of is a wild man out there on the defensive coordinator ranks. The only other name that was kind of a funny young name that maybe a organization like the Ravens would be looking for is Clint Kubiak. He's kinda leading the way out at Seattle, so that could be a younger move so that the Ravens do like longevity there. They've proven that with Harbaugh, so there might be an angle there as well for the Ravens at Clint Kubiak, but lots of good things. I think there's probably what'll be interesting to watch over the next coming months is there's probably gonna be some quick hires, but then I think there's gonna be a few longer drawn out ones that we don't know, maybe a few from the college ranks as the college playoffs come kinda winding down. I think there's obviously opportunity for some of those to make a next step. I think we know, you think about Ole Miss, but he's got a job. The offensive coordinator there has a job at LSU that I would assume he would take eventually when they stop playing for Ole Miss. So that would be a first person that I would think of, but obviously he's off the table, probably not taking interviews. But that's where I think that the coaches is going to be very interesting. And some of these organizations may be shown Dilly for the next 5-10 years of where they can go on this next hire. Do they stay in the bottom end or can they get themselves into relevancy?
Can I throw out a fantasy scenario for you? And I'm not breaking news here because it's been bandied about a little bit. Is Harbaugh gonna wait a little bit for one team in particular to see where they end up in the playoffs? And is one of the teams looking for a coach, waiting for one particular team in the playoffs to see what happens and what happens with their coach? What's the percent chance that we get the dream scenario that we're all yearning for? John Harbaugh to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin to the Baltimore Ravens. I'm and I, this is not totally unfounded. Harbaugh should wait. He should wait for everything to play out a little bit because any team that wants him is going to wait. Um, or he can tell the Giants get lost. He can narrow it down to two teams but Mike Tomlin, and this comes from speculative sources, but there's been some talk that his demeanor has changed. They had fire Tomlin chants in the stadium. I didn't really believe that, and I saw a video of it today, so I am a believer because all videos are real, and you only need one angle to determine absolute truth. Maybe edit that out. I'm not sure Tomlin wants to stay in Pittsburgh. He's a total professional, so I don't think that affects their playoff run. But I'm not sure that organization is 100% on board. They're one missed 35-yard, 41-yard field goal away from being in the exact Ravens situation. Is that a fantasy that could happen? And we don't want to maybe open up to every playoff coach that could end up gone. But I think the Tomlin thing is real, and I would love it. I would love it. Love it. Your thoughts?
Drew, why don't you grab that? I've got a thought on the Tomlin thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, that's a 10 out of 10 if it happens. I mean, I'll become an AFC North fan subscriber next year. I mean, it would be fantastic. I think that Tomlin leaving the Steelers is probably maybe above 50%. And so Harbaugh to the Steelers maybe isn't the most outlandish thing in the world. I'm just having a hard time figuring out then that maybe the Tomlin to Baltimore part's probably the tougher part of that, but it's not 0%. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's good. It's a good Netflix episode there, Dilly. If that happens, I mean, it'll probably be a show at some point. I like the thoughts. I just we're gonna come back to this in a future episode because I think a lot of things need to hash out. But there for sure are some good jobs out there. And to your point, I want to talk about Tomlin. I think he was 75% fired before they got that playoff berth. I think he was on the way out. I don't think Jersey, and that's why I would just question that 50-50 because I think all the Steelers organization is looking for is a reason to let him go. like in that first round loss in the playoffs, which is likely. And you'll tune into next episode. We're going to kind of talk about the playoffs a little bit more in depth, try to get a third party view here with Drew on the Packers Bears. I think it's wise, Dilly. I'm going to kind of run this past you. I think it's wise, being 50 minutes in, that we do another episode that gives the Packers Bears upload. This has been a lot. We talked in pre-production with the coaching, and your question to me is, Herbs, how long do you think we can talk about coaches? And I think my answer was 10 minutes. We are now 51 minutes into talking about only coaches. But I'll tell you what, we have our first. I think, Dilly, we're probably 18, maybe 20 episodes in to the Audible Angle, and this was the first full-fledged Audible great run of the tongue from our host, Jim Dillenberg. That rant that you went on was epic, to the point where I didn't know, I was almost speechless, which is not, it only happens once. It's happened once on one episode, our last one, as a matter of fact, which I was derailed on looking at the wrong stats from a wrong game. And I do appreciate the editing department from the Audible Angle for keeping that in for a little humor. So if I ever bring that back up, you can fire me on the spot, Mr. Boss Man. But I think if you guys have some closing words, what a great episode on coaches and where they're going to go. And this leads us into another episode that I think will be valuable once things shake out.
Had a great time talking coaches today, and particularly because Dylan gave us the best 25 minutes of Brian Dable speak I've ever heard in my entire life. It was just absolutely amazing. Kudos to Jim Dillenberg.
Newsflash, we're not done yet. This episode has not ended. We're not calling it to a close because we did not hit on one particular franchise. Miami Dolphins, absolute dog shit operation down there. I mean, they can rectify it if they pull off the John Harbaugh switcheroo and let him pick a GM. But you got a guy in Mike McDaniels dealing with Tyreek Hill, old lefty soft arm Tua, whatever. We love him. Tua Tagovailoa. All right, just say it already. And, maybe it was the time to get rid of him this year, but we didn't even talk about him as a candidate anywhere else. And he is a candidate as possibly an offensive coordinator, but he's still a head coach quality guy. He kept that team together. I think they went 7-3 down the stretch-ish, something like that, after a 1-6 start, and losing Tyreek Hill and everyone in the world saying he lost the team. It's atrocious. They're terrible. All of a sudden, you got people making fun of Dolphins fans, people in the world, on the internet, wherever. It's all fake. Who gives a shit? They thought it was all over, and they won, I think, 4 in a row, and all of a sudden you start saying, oh my God, they're creeping into that playoff picture. I won't go on much longer about Mike McDaniels. Keep an eye on Mike McDaniels. He has some connection to the Cleveland Browns. He'd be wildly interesting as a Cleveland Brown coach. The downside is quarterback hell, and I don't know if he could endure any more quarterback hell.
Now, Dilly, I think you're right. I think he does have a next job. I would lean to him being an offensive coordinator somewhere before he's another head coach. But I will tell you, the youth of the viewers out there of the NFL are going to be a little sad because there's going to be a lot less style on the sidelines without McDaniels as a coach. And to your point, Dilly, we did talk about the Dolphins. We kicked it off about the Dolphins and Don Shula's grandson, Chris Shula. You just decided not to go on your little rant prior to that.
He's from the Rams. Chris Shula's on the Rams. Just because you say Shula doesn't mean it's the Dolphins. Come on, man. You're stuck in the Marino days. Hey, Marino. Hey, Druzy.
Yeah.
You know, Irby once impersonated Dan Marino for an entire evening with a green suit and a Dolphins orange undershirt.
Was I there?
I don't think so. It was at Thompson wedding in the North Woods, and guys, right. A bunch of people that didn't know Herbs that well. It was during the time in history when I don't think it was Isotone or gloves. It was a different one, but the guy came in the commercial and he goes, "Hey, Marino," and does something in the commercial. So for an entire wedding reception, everybody went up to Herb and said, "Hey, Marino, need a beer? Hey, Marino, another beer?" It was great. That's why Herbs is always thinking of the Dolphins and the Shulas.
Hey guys, I appreciate Dilly. Special shout out to you giving me the reins on the coaching stuff here. I will tell you, it's a hot seat being the host. I'm glad you you hold that down for most of it because it's hard to think on your feet. You make it look easy, fella. Druzy, as always, regular contributor. What a great episode on coaching staffs. We've got a good game going. Halftime of the game, I believe it's 17-13. Good guys, Hurricanes of holding off the Ole Miss Rebels. But it's going to be a hot second half. That's when the Ole Miss guys come back and sneak up. So I think we're in for a good one. Dilly, is this a wrap? We ready to go to the next?
Now this is a wrap. We'll get back together when we can for a final playoff review. Emphasis, Packers, Bears. See ya.
See ya.